So all eyes have been on Iran over the last week, but plenty of worrying things have been happening in the US that have kind of been pushed out of the headlines. So today I'm going to go through some of them, covering voting and democracy, renewed attacks on university and information, and more attacks on perceived enemies at home. So on voting and democracy, so for the first time last week, President Trump linked his false claims of a rigged election in 2020 to the fates of people who'd been murdered. So he met with families whose family members had been killed by undocumented immigrants as part of his anti-immigrant push. But Trump said that those people would still be alive if the 2020 election hadn't been rigged. So that is kind of a real escalation in his rhetoric against rigged elections. And then there's more kind of controlling of information. So while he was special counsel, Jack Smith produced a detailed report on Trump's mishandling of reams of classified documents after Trump left the White House in 2021. So last month, Jack Smith testified in front of Congress about several aspects of his election interference prosecution. But he's never been allowed to discuss his findings on the classified documents case in public because a Trump-appointed judge, Judge Cannon, temporarily blocked the release of Jack Smith's report about it shortly before Trump's inauguration last year. And then last week, Judge Cannon has now permanently barred the Department of Justice from ever releasing that report. So who knows what it says. Then the Department of Justice also sued 5 more states for voter data, 3 of them Republican-led, so that's Utah, Oklahoma and West Virginia. So it's now sued 24 states for voter data, most of which have been Democrat-led. And this really just seems to be an escalating effort to seize the personal and private information of voters ahead of the midterms. So moving on now to renewed attacks on universities and information. So first, officials said that the Trump administration is stepping up work to uncover what the administration sees as malign foreign influence at US colleges and universities. And then the Department of Justice sued the University of California in Los Angeles, so UCLA, accusing it of creating a hostile work environment for Jewish faculty. So this is an accusation that the administration has frequently actually used over the last year to target universities it doesn't like. 2 days after that, Columbia University said that one of its students was arrested by federal immigration officers who apparently misrepresented themselves to gain entry to a residential building to make the arrest, which is against university rules. And then a day after that, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth ordered the cancellation of members of the military attending some of the country's top-ranked colleges and universities beginning from this September, saying that schools are teaching the enemy's wicked ideologies to service members. So that's basically really restricting where army personnel can go to college. And then the Trump administration is interviewing law students for summer placements. But this time there's a White House official sitting in to vet the political loyalty of each candidate. And the Liberty University School of Law actually told its students hoping for a summer placement, you must be aligned politically with President Trump for the summer job, and that GPA was not a strong factor in the decision. And then thinking more broadly about controlling information. So there's this thing called the Reference Manual on Scientific Evidence, and it's used to support judges in cases that involve complex scientific and technical evidence. And it's produced jointly between the Federal Judicial Center and the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering and Medicine. But now, more than 24 contributors are raising alarm bells about political interference after a chapter on climate science was deleted. And apparently it was deleted after Republican state attorney generals in a letter requested it's removed, claiming it was biased. And then, in a move that I just find really sad, a leaked Interior Department database revealed US plans to revise historical information. So basically, it revealed how far the Trump administration is prepared to go to revise or remove information on African American history, LGBT rights, climate change and other topics at hundreds of national park sites. And then the final thing I wanted to go over was the targeting of perceived enemies. So in the latest escalation of the war that the administration has been having with Minnesota pretty much all year, Vice President Vance announced last week that the Trump administration would temporarily halt more than $250 million in Medicaid reimbursements to the state of Minnesota. This was branded as part of Trump's newly announced war on fraud. Then there have been some firings of federal employees. So FBI Director Kash Patel fired at least 10 FBI employees who'd been working with former Special Counsel Jack Smith on the investigation into Trump's retention of classified records. So that was a report that's now been permanently blocked from public release. And then the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, fired 22 staff members who worked on environmental justice. And finally, after the State of the Union, Trump attacked Democrat representatives Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, who'd shouted, "You are killing Americans," during his State of the Union speech. So after that, in a social media post, Trump wrote, "They had the bulging, bloodshot eyes of crazy people, lunatics, mentally deranged and sick, who frankly look like they should be institutionalized." And he then went on to say that they should be sent back to where they came from. So that kind of covers it for this week. Again, all actions are available on trumpactiontracker.info. Do check it out, and I'll be back in a week or so.